Welcome back to 7's Afternoon News and our special coverage of the continuing protest in the city by angry tradies and also the earthquake that shook Melbourne. We'll get to that in a minute, but first let's go back to Paul Dowsley at the Shrine where there's a standoff with protesters. Any update, Paul?
Yeah, and it's a curious strategy by police. I'm sure, of course, they have a strategy here, but in the past 30 seconds, and the crowd has erupted at a move from officers. Police have moved back. All lines of police have walked backwards a couple of metres, several metres, meaning the crowd has been able to come down from the steps and come back across this area at the front that had been gained, if you like, by police over the 2+ hours that they have been there. So I guess it's re-energised the crowd here with the sense that they are here and still able to mill around and take back some further ground that they had lost to police. Mike?
Yeah, quite bizarre. Let's go to Tegan Doling on the other side of the Shrine. What are you seeing from your vantage point, Teags?
Yeah, exactly what Paul just said, Mike. We've seen all the police here, obviously, with the mounted branch. That was something we could really see all take a big step back. They probably retreated around 10 metres, and that's allowed the protesters to, where they were at the top of the stairs, to come back down onto the grass. So that was really quite strange that they've allowed that to happen. Seeing a few police walk past us at the moment. They're the police that have gone and processed the people who have already been arrested, and they're coming back, we would assume, to get a few more. But yeah, very, very bizarre that the police have done that, considering what Shane Patton said this morning and last night. Different tactics, not going to be monitoring the situation, going to be going in and making sure these protesters are held to account for the fact that they're breaking rules at the moment. But the fact that they've taken a step back makes you question what their next move or the next tactic is. It might be because, Mike, as I told you earlier, we did hear the protesters screaming at police to let them go freely, that they will go peacefully if the police part and they make room for that to happen. Maybe that's what the police are looking at doing at the moment, Mike.
Yeah, again, we're seeing live pictures. These are from the protesters live streaming from the other side of the police. Of course, they're in a difficult position, the police, because they wouldn't really want violence on the steps of the Shrine there. It's obviously it's our most sacred building. So we'll continue to monitor the situation there and cross back to you, Tegan or Paul, when we need to. Thank you. Now, if our state and city hasn't already suffered enough, today, just after 9 o'clock, we were shaken to our core by the strongest earthquake ever recorded in Victoria. Frightened residents ran from homes, apartments and office buildings, unsure what was going on. The 5.9 quake badly damaged several buildings, including a popular burger cafe on Chapel Street that was reduced to rubble. As the clean-up begins, experts warn aftershocks are likely. Shortly, we'll cross live to the epicentre, but first, Georgia Comensoli has a look at the day Victoria shook.
Thousands of bricks shaken onto the street from a burger joint on Chapel Street.
Oh my God.
Dust and debris filling the area. Unbelievably lucky no one was hurt.
Yeah, there was dust everywhere. It was quite massive. Just thank God no one was under it.
Look, the main thing for us was that none of our team were hurt. So I think that was the main message, that we wanted to get around, make sure no one was inside.
It's just one scene from the biggest earthquake Victoria's ever registered. Its epicentre 180 kilometres away from this destruction in Lycola in the state's northeast. It was felt right across Victoria and part of South Australia, New South Wales and Tasmania.
Come away from the window.
Live breakfast TV was interrupted.
Is it an earthquake or a structural thing? Let's go. Yeah, that was a big one. That's still going. That's still tremoring.
Yeah, it seems to be something of a tremor, I think. Oh, Jesus.
Well, you're feeling an earthquake.
So too, radio.
Oh my God.
Jeez.
What is this?
Did we just get hit by an earthquake?
Victorians at home just as shaken.
I don't know what's happening.
In Benalla, in Bundoora.
The house is shaking.
In Officer, Kilsyth.
Oh my God.
Dallas. A baby woken by the tremors in its cot. A plank stopped short. Skiers on Mount Buller stopped in their tracks. Operations at Melbourne Airport were temporarily stopped after a shakier landing than expected for some. Hospitals across the city were evacuated. Even the Bunnings at Port Melbourne couldn't withstand the quake.
The roof tiles had fallen in and they've fallen down and smashed my back windscreen.
While thousands of high-rise residents and office workers across the city were forced to flee to safety.
The thing started shaking and it's like the ground underneath me was like 2 and I started freaking out. So I just ran out of there as soon as I could.
I saw my bed was shaking and I was scared.
I was personally, like everyone else, was sleeping. And I actually woke up with the shaking of the bed.
We all took off down the fire escape and came out here. And we've been out here ever since, and I don't know if we can even go back. Aftershocks. Yeah, I've never been so scared in my life.
Across Melbourne's southeast, 7,000 homes without power after the tremor. This house in Armidale smashed by bricks. The Bureau says there's no tsunami threat, but Victoria should now brace for more aftershocks. Georgia Commons, Solly, 7 News.
Let's go now to Sonia Marinelli, who's in Mansfield, near the epicentre of the earthquake. Sonia, remarkably, it appears the area has escaped major damage.
Yes, Mike, it was quite remarkable. The 5.8 magnitude earthquake struck not far from where I am in Mansfield in the state's northeast. It hit at 9:15 this morning at a depth of 10 kilometres. And we have had reports of up to 6 aftershocks in the hours since. But yes, remarkably, regional Victoria has emerged relatively unscathed. There were reports of some building damage here in Mansfield, but nothing major. Residents here reported hearing a very loud roar. One man described it as like a 10-ton excavator on his front doorstep, and they all felt that violent tremor as homes shook and furniture fell and pictures fell off walls. That tremor was felt right across the state. 7,000 homes and premises were left without power, particularly around the Myrtleford and the Corryong area. And there was also some structural damage, including to the roof of St Patrick's Church in Wangaratta. Beechworth Hospital, they were forced onto backup generators also as a result of that power loss. Remarkably, though, there were a few calls for assistance to the SES, so their focus really in the hours after the tremor were on the critical infrastructure. So they had 2 helicopters up in the air over the last few hours assessing our major roads and also our rail lines. Now, the Sydney to Melbourne train route, that was declared damage-free, thankfully, and also our major dams, they escaped relatively unscathed with no structural damage. The 2 main ones up here in the northeast being the Eildon Dam and also the Hume Dam. But the epicentre was in the foothills of the Yarra Ranges, so that tremor was felt very strongly up at our ski resorts. A snow cam on Mount Buller captured the moment the earthquake struck, catching skiers off guard. There's been no structural damage up there, and despite there being up to 15 centimetres of snow on the mountain, there was no risk of any avalanche, thankfully. I spoke to Arilla Morgan, who was up on the mountain at the time. She said that they've never felt anything like it.
It certainly added a little bit of unexpected spice to the morning. At 9:16, everything started shaking up here on the mountain, and we definitely felt it really strongly right across the whole resort. Some people, of course, were on chairlifts. Thankfully, we have those stop really quickly, and everyone was completely safe and sound.
Mike, it's amazing just how far-reaching this earthquake has been. It was felt right across southeastern Australia. We had reports of the tremor being felt in South Australia, New South Wales, Canberra, and also in Tasmania. Thankfully, those tremors in the hours since haven't been too strong, but we're not out of the woods yet. There are concerns that there could be some stronger tremors to come over the next 24 hours, Mike.
Sonia Marinelli, live in Mansfield. Thank you. Experts are warning Victorians to brace for aftershocks, as Sonia just said. For months, Nick McCallum spoke to Adam Pasquale from the Seismology Research Centre.
I'm with Adam Pasquale from the Seismology Research Centre. Adam, first question, where were you and what did you actually feel?
Well, I'm working from home at the moment, so I was in my bedroom and I did notice it straight away, feeling that earthquake, and I could tell roughly where it was based on how long between those 2 big energy pulses that we felt.
So you came down, checked your machine and your computer, and what did you find?
Well, we found that the nearest stations to the earthquake went off scale, so we had to work out the magnitude from more distant earthquake stations, and we determined it was a magnitude 5.8 earthquake located in near Licola North, Woods Point area in Gippsland, Victoria.
And how does that rank?
So a 5.8 earthquake is the largest onshore Victorian earthquake in recorded history, so it's very significant.
What would have happened if that had occurred much closer to Melbourne or under Melbourne?
So if you think of equivalent size earthquakes, if Newcastle and Christchurch, they were 5.6 and 6.1, so in the same sort of region, and they were really close to those cities. If that had happened, if this earthquake had happened under Melbourne, there would have been significant damage along the lines of those earthquakes.
That's quite a horrifying thought.
It is, and even today we've seen some damage from this earthquake in Melbourne from unreinforced masonry buildings, and those types of buildings are the ones that are most susceptible to damage from earthquakes.
In layman's terms, why has this occurred?
That part of Victoria, the Great Dividing Range, has been formed by earthquakes over millennia. So this is the region of the most seismic activity in Victoria. So it's not unusual that an earthquake would occur in this area. Earthquakes basically are the release of stress after that stress is built up in rocks, and the rock just can't take any more, so it breaks. And then the aftershocks continue. It continues to break until it can form itself into a regime where it can start building up stress again.
What sort of aftershocks have we had?
We've had aftershocks every couple of minutes. The largest so far was about 15 minutes after the main shock, and that was about 4.7. But we are having them every few minutes, magnitude 2s and 3s, and we expect these to continue for months, potentially years.
That's a little bit disconcerting for the people of Melbourne, isn't it?
It is. We certainly won't feel any of those aftershocks in Melbourne unless they get to over magnitude 5. But certainly for the people in the epicentral area, they'll be feeling every one.
Why is this so rare in Melbourne?
So we don't have big earthquakes near Melbourne very often. Over the last few years we had a magnitude 5.5 near Moe, and that was felt in Melbourne. We've had some 4.5s in Korumburra. They do happen from time to time, but they're so rare that they fall out of people's memory.
And was it unusual that it was felt as far away as northern New South Wales?
Certainly, it's surprising how far earthquakes in southeast Victoria can be felt. Because we are in a stable continental region, we've got old hard rock, and that energy travels a really long way.
Thank you very much, Adam Pascal from the Seismology Research Centre.
Nick McCallum there. There have been at least 110 calls for help across Victoria following the earthquake. Malvern, Essendon and Kensington were among the areas hardest hit. Victoria State Emergency Service Deputy Chief Officer Alistair Drayton is live at the State Control Centre this afternoon. Alistair, thank you for your time. Of all the things we come to talk to you about, earthquakes. Tell us what your teams have been through today.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mike. Look, our teams have been out pretty much since 9:15 this morning, largely around that Melbourne area where we've seen sort of most of the impacts or damage, if you like. Unfortunately, given what everyone did feel this morning, there has been very minor damage, building damage, yes. Fortunately, there's been no injuries as such around, but our crews have been out and continuing to be out today. Looking around, you would have seen some on the social feeds and the media, particularly around Chapel Street, which has been one of the ones this morning in Toorak there, South Yarra area, with one of the building wall collapses there, which has been quite well publicised. But the other important thing is we've also seen things like our stakeholder agencies going around doing critical infrastructure, really, really important that we look into dams and rivers and those sorts of things as well.
Alistair, what sorts of hazards do you have to be mindful of after an earthquake like this?
Your immediate environment, and I'd ask everyone to sort of check that if people do feel that they look around your place. The most important thing is that people do, particularly if as you mentioned earlier in relation to the aftershocks, don't leave a building if you are experiencing an aftershock. Stay in, drop, cover and hold is what we say. There's some additional really good information on the Vic SES website that we continue to provide advice to, and it's been, as I say, our social medias today have been seeing a lot of activity seeking that advice.
Yeah, you guys are very well trained. Floods, all sorts of disasters. I wonder how much training do you put in for earthquakes?
Yeah, earthquakes, it's about the consequence management and how our organisation was seen with our partner agencies today. We'll see even CFA out supporting Vic SES today, going around, particularly in some of the older suburbs that we know that there could have been some of that damage today. But our teams were well structured up in both the metropolitan areas and also up in Benalla, up closer, much closer to the epicentre there, as you heard earlier, that it's so far widespread, so that our crews are able to respond should they need to. And as you've heard, we've had in excess of about 100 calls today. Majority of those, 50 of those, being in the metropolitan Melbourne.
Alistair, thank you for all that your teams do. Alistair Drayton from the SES, appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Our special coverage of the earthquake continues just ahead. After the break, the latest on Victoria's COVID fight, with 628 new COVID cases today, plus mandatory jabs for all teachers and early childhood educators. And France lashes out as the Prime Minister works to cool a growing spat over submarines. Back soon across Victoria and Tasmania. Live from Melbourne, you're watching 7's Afternoon News. 17 degrees outside right now. Jane Bunn will be here with the forecast later in the hour. If you've just joined us, Victoria has been rocked by a magnitude 5.9 earthquake. Buildings have been damaged and thousands of people have been evacuated from high-rise apartments in the city. The epicentre was at Lacolla North, that's near Woods Point in the Gippsland High Country. Our special coverage continues just ahead. All teachers and early childhood educators must be fully vaccinated against COVID by the end of November. Victoria recorded 628 new COVID cases today and, sadly, 3 more deaths. Let's go live now to Chanel Vella in the newsroom. And Chanel, how have teachers responded?
Well, Mike, the overwhelming response so far has been that teachers have wanted this for weeks. They say they've been lining up to get vaccinated and are happy for it to be made mandatory. The vaccine rules will apply to all school staff, including those in early learning settings, and it will be applied across every school, government or private.
Children under 12 cannot get vaccinated. Children between 12 and 15 have only been able to get vaccinated from the 13th of September. There are very clear public health reasons why it is a requirement for all staff to get vaccinated.
The state government has also announced extra funding for shade sails so that children can hold outdoor classes, and another $60 million will be put towards building outdoor learning areas. And on top of that, 51,000 air purifiers will be provided to schools in the coming weeks. Mike.
Chanel Vella, live in the newsroom. Thank you. US President Joe Biden has called Australia one of America's closest allies in his first one-on-one meeting with Scott Morrison. The visit hasn't all been smooth sailing, though, with France again lashing out over the broken submarine deal. US correspondent David Woywood has more.
Well, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has met with the US President Joe Biden today, their first one-on-one meeting in a loaded schedule of engagements for the PM, overshadowed by a growing and persistent diplomatic stoush. Both leaders still weathering European scrutiny over their new formalised alliance.
But it's not just about our partnership, because our partnership reaches out to so many others, whether it be our friends in the ASEAN nations or in Europe or elsewhere, where we share so many like-minded interests.
The United States has no closer or more reliable ally than Australia.
That claim today questioned in France. Its defence minister calling out Australia's move to tear up multi-billion-dollar submarine contracts under the AUKUS alliance a strategic turning point.
As you know, for us, transparency and loyalty are fundamental principles in order to build strong partnerships.
The Prime Minister, though, unmoved. The decision to side with US technology for construction of the nuclear fleet in the country's national interest, he says.
The Indo-Pacific will be a region that will challenge the world and will determine the future of so many all around the world.
Mr Morrison now with days more diplomatic engagements in the US capital, with unsurprisingly no French delegates or representatives on that long list of meetings.
Let's go back to that standoff at the Shrine now with protesters. Tegan Dolling is there. Tegan, give us an update.
Well, Mike, we haven't moved, but you can see from the last time I spoke to you how much the police have encroached up on the protesters. A lot's actually happened in the last 20 minutes. The protesters have walked down the steps with their hands in the air. They've been pleading with the police to let them go. They're saying, we'll walk peacefully, let us go. We want to leave. We should have left 20 minutes ago. But what's happened is the police have said no. They've now pushed them back up. You can see them starting to move again, push them back up to the shrine. And we did see a few, I think it was full water bottles being chucked at the police. One's hit the horses, the mounted branch. So there's a bit more of a tense standoff. I'm just trying to listen to what the police PA is saying. I think they're telling them to leave down St Kilda Road. So they're obviously wanting them to leave the area. Public order response is starting to move in again now, but very much a tense standoff. I'll just show you, as you can see, the police are starting to walk towards them again. I think they're trying to push them down off the shrine.
Tiggs, I'm going to interrupt you. We've got Paul Dowsley, who is at the other side where that's happening. Paul, tell us what's happening.
Yeah, the police have opened up this side of the shrine on the St Kilda Road side. They put an announcement over a loudspeaker a short time ago asking the gathering to disperse down onto St Kilda Road. They've now closed up this side, but the group was starting to move out, but have now just continued to stand around rather than move off, and they are still chanting on the steps. Police on Tegan's side, the far side maybe of the angle that you're seeing at the moment, have closed up behind the group, edging them to come down the hill onto St Kilda Road. They had started moving, Mike, but they're not continuing through as requested by police.
So let's just get this right. They've got the opportunity to leave, but they're now refusing to leave.
Well, it's unclear whether they ever agreed to leave, but there certainly was movement that they were. We had a sense that there was a senior police member at the very front of the line negotiating with a member of this group. I couldn't hear from where I was, but that member of the group then put something to the group through a loudspeaker, and the group very much disagreed with whatever was put to them. But it seems now despite some moves here, the police have closed up this side, encouraging them to go down the hill, but they are not budging the group.
OK, Paul Dowsley, you stay there. We'll come back to you when it warrants. We will return to our special coverage of the Victorian earthquake coming up next, the biggest quake to hit the state since records began, with a warning to brace for more aftershocks. And the Bulldogs and Demons ramp up their grand final preparation. Stay with us right here on 7. Victoria has been rocked by the largest earthquake since records began. Melburnians recording their reactions as the powerful 5.9 magnitude tremor hit. Here's Jacqueline Felgate.
The damage was extensive. Buildings in ruins on Chapel Street.
We were basically the first here. We were just out getting our morning coffee and everything happened. Saw all the rubble across the road.
As the biggest quake ever recorded in Victoria struck just after 9 a.m. Its epicentre 180 kilometres away from the city in Lacola in the state's northeast.
Definitely a significant earthquake. It was felt widely across southeastern Australia, from Adelaide through to Sydney, through to Tasmania and right across Victoria, of course.
When it hit, Melburnians knew exactly what it was.
Come here, come out!
Breakfast announcers were on air when their building shook at Nova.
Can you feel that as well?
Yeah, I can feel it.
Oh my God!
Jeez.
What is this?
Is this a genuine earthquake?
And at SEN.
Happening now, that final piece of the puzzle.
Did we just get hit by an earthquake?
Buildings were evacuated in the city. Every suburb of Melbourne felt the quake. Babies woke in their cots as the earth shook. Due to Melbourne's lockdown, most were at home when it hit.
Oh my God. Babe.
And the roar was like a jet engine. School holiday fun suddenly a little more serious.
Yeah, she's all right? The house is shaking!
And meditation sessions weren't so calming. Melbourne dogs knew what was coming. And even the Collins Street falcon left its nest for a peek. Jacqueline Felgate, 7 News.
To the grand final build-up, and the Western Bulldogs and Demons have held top-secret training sessions. Let's go live to Chief Football reporter Tom Brown, who's in Perth. Tom, both teams were behind closed doors today.
Mike, there's an air of intrigue now about these finely tuned grand final preparations of both sides. The Bulldogs held a closed session behind me at Optus late this morning. They did allow the media in for about 15 minutes, and we'll break down those shots and explain what that means for their grand final team shortly at 6 o'clock. Now, Melbourne went one step further. The Demons training as we speak behind me still, about an hour and a half into their session. They didn't open that session at all. Now, I've just spoken to Demons contacts. It sounds like Smith and May will both be fit for selection, which means obviously you think Hibberd could be the heartbreak story from Melbourne's selection perspective. It's also a heartbreaking potential selection story at the Bulldogs, with Vandermeer, Keith and Waitman all ready to go. Perhaps Zane Cordy will fall out of the side. But this was a reaction from training late this morning.
Oh, last time I laughed, I was excited. Probably the prelim. To be on this journey with the football club and to finally be in a grand final that so many fans have been waiting for and been very impatient, frustrated, and to be on this journey with them and to finally be there on the biggest day that of their lives and our lives is pretty special.
Just backing in what we've done to get ourselves here. We don't need to do anything different. I suppose that'd probably be one thing. I think some people can try and they try and overperform or try and do things different, but just stick to what you know.
This game on Saturday will give a lot of hope and a lot of energy for the people who are locked down.
Mike, I spoke one-on-one with Gil McLachlan at the AFL 7 Grand Final breakfast this morning. I'll have more on that interview shortly in our bulletin at 6 o'clock. And just finally, Michael Voss has arrived in Melbourne late this morning for high-level talks with Brian Cook, the new Carlton CEO, regarding their vacant position. I'm assured by the Blues this afternoon they haven't decided yet on Voss or Kingsley. Cook wants to speak to both of them in person, but clearly Voss, who has to leave South Australia in quarantine going back, is edging closer to the vacant Carlton coaching job. There's music going on behind me, Mike, as part of the build-up. They're practising. I'll have more live from here in Perth at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it all looks dreadful in Perth. You must be missing Melbourne. Tom Brown, thank you. You're watching a special edition of 7's Afternoon News. We're covering two major unfolding stories today. Victoria shaken to its core by the state's biggest earthquake on record, and heavily armed police in a standoff with protesters at the shrine. We're back in just a couple of minutes.
Live from Melbourne, this is 7's Afternoon News with Mike Amor.
Welcome back. Victoria has been rocked by our biggest earthquake on record, a magnitude 5.9 quake. Georgia Comensoli is across the details. And Georgia, it's been felt throughout the state.
Mike, while we saw destruction across Melbourne, the epicentre is over 180 kilometres away in Lycola, which is near Mansfield. The earthquake hit at 9:15 this morning. Geoscience Australia says the quake originated at a depth of 10 kilometres below the ground. The tremors were felt right across Victoria and interstate, including South Australia, New South Wales and Tasmania. It is the biggest earthquake to ever hit Victoria. At Chapel Street, a burger place is lucky to be standing after thousands of bricks flew from the building onto the street below. Incredibly, nobody was injured. Thousands of people who were working in office buildings and high-rise apartments in the city were told to quickly evacuate to the street below. Many Victorians at home when the earthquake hit, not quite understanding what it was, were quick to rush outside. It lasted around 20 seconds here in the city, while closer to its epicentre it went on for almost a minute. And experts are warning Victorians to stay safe and be alert today. They say it's likely we will see more aftershocks from the quake. Mike?
Georgia, thank you. Let's go live now to earthquake scientist, Associate Professor Mark Quigley from the University of Melbourne. Thanks for joining us again, Mark. You say this earthquake is around a magnitude 5.9. It's been bouncing around a little bit today. Take us through what that means.
What it means is we're talking about something that's on the order of maybe 3 to 4 kilometres long and maybe 3 to 4 kilometres wide, a fault plane in the Earth's surface that is ruptured in a side-to-side motion. So the rocks have slid past each other, probably a metre or so. and that's generated a lot of seismic energy that has propagated outward from the location of the earthquake in the Southeast Highlands all the way through, and it's the source of the shaking that we felt in Melbourne.
Yeah, we've already had some aftershocks. Should we expect more? How concerned should we be about them?
Yeah, we should expect more. And typically for an earthquake of this magnitude, we'd expect hundreds of small aftershocks, tens of sort of medium-sized ones, and we typically get aftershocks as big as 4.5 or even a high 4. And so those would be felt quite strongly if you're in the epicentral area and that was to occur beneath you. We've already had one of those. About 15 minutes after the main earthquake, we had a magnitude 4.7 aftershock. So we would expect more of those going forward.
Mark Quigley from the University of Melbourne, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay, pleasure. Thank you.
All Victorian teachers and early childhood educators must be fully vaccinated against COVID by November 29. There's 628 new cases today and 3 more deaths.
257 people are currently in hospital with COVID-19, 58 are in ICU and 37 are on ventilator. Of the cases who were in hospital yesterday, 81% were not vaccinated, 15% were partially vaccinated and 3% of people were fully vaccinated.
Ballarat will emerge from lockdown at midnight and their restrictions will fall into line with the rest of regional Victoria. Our special coverage of the protests and the Victorian earthquake continues. Just ahead we speak to former 7 presenter Craig Willis, who experienced the shock near the epicentre, and details on a new road safety crackdown over the grand final long weekend. We're back soon here on 7. Welcome back. Let's go back to that standoff at the shrine with protesters. Paul Dowsley has been there for many hours. Paul, what are you seeing now?
Inch by inch, Mike, police are coming across the front steps of the shrine. They've repeatedly on loudspeakers said to the crowd that they need to disperse down St Kilda Road. And again, in the past 15, 20 seconds, that front line of riot police there with the helmets have edged forward another couple of metres, trying to edge this crowd down onto St Kilda Road to get them off the steps of the shrine that they have been on for hours now. The protesters say they are refusing because they want to be exiting straight down the middle, down that middle driveway. You'd be all familiar with that beautiful view of the shrine from back down at the Yarra River. They want to come down the front here to get away, and that's why they are not doing as requested and going down the side of the shrine.
Paul, police very early this morning said they were not going to tolerate these protests. It's difficult to be critical of them. It's certainly a very delicate situation on the steps of the shrine, but they're giving these people every chance to leave peacefully, and yet still they're not.
Absolutely, and you particularly have to take on board what you've said, because that's coming from the Chief Commissioner, has promised a change in tactics to stop this very thing that we're seeing happening now from happening. And the other thing is that if they do disperse from here down onto St Kilda Road, they then have the choice of going home or marching on. And let me tell you here, the energy of this group, I can't imagine that many, if any, will be going home. Or what they will be doing is hitting St Kilda Road and then making that decision about whether they turn left and go down towards Albert Park Lake, or turn right and go back into the city where they have been all day walking through the streets. They're going on the loudspeaker again. So yeah, they've just said again, the exit is via St Kilda Road, and you need...
I can hear that, Paul. Seems like a stubborn standoff.
We can go home.
And you will have full coverage coming up in 7 News at 6 with Peter Mitchell. Thank you, mate. Returning to the magnitude 5.9 earthquake now, and the epicentre was just north of Lecola in Gippsland, around 100 kilometres from Burralite, where resident and former 7 presenter Craig Willis felt the shock. Craig, great to see you again. Talk us through what you experienced.
Mike, thank you. This morning, around about 9:15, sitting at the kitchen table with my partner Donna, we were having a chat, and all of a sudden the house started to vibrate, which I thought at first may have been a truck going past, as we often do in the road that we live on here. and we felt that sort of slight vibration. But this then progressively got worse and worse, and then the entire cottage was shake, rattle and rolling. And it lasted 30, 35 seconds. A few things off the mantelpiece, a couple of things in the kitchen that fell on the floor here. But then we had an aftershock. I'd say about 20 minutes afterwards. I heard the expert on 7 News a little earlier today talking about the chance of aftershocks. Well, we had an aftershock, which was just a mild rumble and a little shaking of the ground, but nothing compared to what we had at around 9:15. And talking to a few people, I've been into town, there's no damage, it would appear, in the Mansfield township, but people felt like it was a really, which we get often up here, a very strong wind coming through the area. But of course, we now know that it was a fairly large magnitude earthquake.
Who would have thought, Craig? It's great to see you, and I hope you will stay well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
Victoria Police will be ramping up road safety ahead of this weekend's grand final. Operation Scoreboard will focus on speeding and impaired driving.
The trauma that we're seeing on Victorian roads, even during the period of lockdown, that is caused by significant impairment, is unacceptable. It is unacceptable.
The operation launches tonight on the 30th anniversary of the tragic accident that killed Collingwood star Darren Mullane. It really has been an extraordinary news day here in Melbourne, hasn't it? Thanks for staying with us throughout it. Stay with us now for any developments on the unfolding protests and more reaction to our 5.9 magnitude earthquake. That's all coming up. Our special coverage continues in just a moment. OK, we're breaking back in. There's been some movement at the shrine. Paul Dowsley is there. Paul, what's happened?
Absolute flashpoint in the past minute or so, where police moved in and they have started firing rubber bullets at protesters. As you can see, the steps now largely empty. Smoke still in the air up there at the steps that you might be seeing as police advance now past the front of the shrine, flanking it on either side to clear this group out to the back. At the front here at the bottom steps, we have several people who have been arrested. You can see also on the ground bottles that have been thrown at police. I can see maybe a dozen people being let off that have been arrested. The mounted branch now coming in from the rear here. And Ollie, my colleague here, if we move this way to keep away from the police, we might see where this group has now dispersed to. They've headed down the hill towards St Kilda Road. It seems to me maybe they are more... Are you all right, Ollie? It seems that they are now more towards the back. Can you hear the shots there? There's a flare now at the top of the shrine. You can see the smoke. Flare has been lit off by protesters, and I'm not sure, Mike, whether you heard those shots of more rubber bullets. I've heard an enormous amount of those.
Paul, this is heartbreaking to see something like this happening at such a sacred site like the shrine. We've got to point out the police gave these protesters every chance to move on, didn't they? And they refused, and this is the result.
Oh, absolutely. For hours, police have been telling them to disperse, and they've been doing it across the whole day. And clearly, these protesters know they are breaking the law. Sure. They feel like they have an axe to grind with whoever, the state government, the chief health officer, but this, they know they are breaking the law. They know the police were coming. They know the police promised that this would be the outcome. And I imagine the police are pretty good shots. A lot of people will have copped rubber bullets in the back here. Police, obviously, the mounted branch here, trying to coordinate a way to get the best position. These horses are incredible.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Paul, most of the protesters, have they moved away from the shrine now, or are there still some up there?
Yeah, it seems to me the shrine building itself is safe and protected. The very back now is still part of these beautiful gardens, and the protesters are all back there. I'm watching now as protesters are throwing objects at police who are up on the steps, coming down the back way, again trying to clear this crowd back down onto St Kilda Road.
Yeah, again, not the place we want to see this type of protest or violence.
Oh,
Paul Dowsley.
Just a shot there, mate.
Paul Dowsley, you've been doing a sterling job, and of course, again, you'll have full coverage of what's happening at the shrine. This standoff seems to be coming to an end after so long.
Down the hill.
We will come back to you, Paul, no doubt during the 6 o'clock news. Whoop, there we go. We can hear some more. We'll just stay with it right now. We can hear. You can see what appears to be the right
police who
spot.
are firing as they're coming down. Absolutely, they are throwing another bang. This is. Keep moving. We need to move here, Ollie. It's unclear what that bang was. I can only imagine that it was something from police who are now coming forward down the hill, again trying to get this group that is now dispersed across a large area at the back of the shrine towards St Kilda Road. We're going to... Okay, this is part of the tactics that police are using to clear this group. I'm not sure if you can see down the hill there is the group. I might come this way, All
right.
You all right?
You stay safe, Paul, please. We'll just stay with it just for a little bit longer.
These police are continuing to shoot as they come down these hills. The hill here at the back. I'm not sure if you heard that rapid succession of many shots. The police mounted branch now coming down as well. As this crowd is just hitting St Kilda Road, Mike. So I can only imagine that this will aggravate the crowd, that this will charge them up with anger more than they've already had today. There's no way that this crowd is going to disperse. They will stay together, I would say, because they are now more angry than ever. And some of them, I'd say, are badly injured by those bullets, those rubber bullets, which really sting.
Yeah, Paul, and again, they had ample time, ample chance to leave. We could hear the police earlier giving them warning over the loud hailer to leave via St Kilda Road. They repeatedly refused, didn't they? And this is the result.
Yeah, so they're at the junction now, the Domain Road junction. I can hear them, I just can't see them. There is a pinch point here because of the construction of the tunnel, the metro tunnel. It's a small area that everyone is going to have to squeeze through because it's a construction like... Not sure if we can come through here, Ollie.
Again, Paul, we're in your hands. Don't take any chances.
No, I understand. The police running through here, Ollie. They are coming through that real quick. That's the pinch point I'm talking about, where there's a small area where pedestrians can cross the street because of the metro tunnel project. So police have now fortified that area. We're being told to move back from here, which is fine. But I'm not sure, and I don't wish to really get to the other side because it might be a little too dangerous.
No, we certainly don't want that, Paul. It looks like that you've gone as far as you can go safely. Again, you will have complete coverage of how this unfolds in 7 News at 6 with Peter Mitchell. Please take care.
Thanks, Mike.
A magnitude 5.9 earthquake has rocked Victoria, forcing city residents to evacuate apartments and causing damage to buildings across the state. The SES has received more than 100 calls for help following the massive tremors. It's the state's biggest quake on record. Popular entertainment precinct Chapel Street suffered extensive damage in that earthquake. Here's Jodie Lee.
Well, good afternoon. The sign outside Betty's Burgers here on Chapel Street reads classic shakes, but I doubt this is what they had in mind. The damage here is extensive as a result of that 5.8 magnitude earthquake that struck with an epicentre near Mansfield.
Oh my God.
Here, 180 kilometres away, it's brought down the wall of Betty's Burgers.
This is
Eyewitnesses have told 7 News that those bricks didn't just fall, they spat out from the wall of the restaurant across Green Street.
There was dust everywhere, it was quite massive. Just thank God no one was under it.
The main thing for us was that none of our team were hurt, so I think that was the main message, that we wanted to get around, make sure no one was inside.
Incredibly lucky though, no one here was seriously injured, but we do know there was just one person inside the building at the time. She works at the design studio upstairs and has told 7 News she didn't know what to do but other than duck under a table and seek shelter. She's incredibly lucky not to have been injured either, as the building itself came crumbling down. Chapel Street here in Windsor is still closed in both directions. A tram is stopped dead in its tracks here as emergency crews work to clear the debris. We're expecting shortly for structural engineers to make their way here to the scene so they can assess the extent of the damage to Betty's Burgers here on Chapel Street.
Let's take a quick look at Melbourne's roads right now.
Good afternoon, I'm Jess Miller in the Tassal Salmon traffic chopper just over Aspendale at the moment, having a look at some stable earth. How nice is that? The Nepean Highway heavily delayed though, outbound from Lincoln Parade through to Lochiel Avenue. This is due to lanes being restricted for works. Switch your dinner for a protein-packed, hot-smoked Tassal salmon grain salad, cooked and ready to eat for a delicious boost of omega-3. Tassal, it's Tasmanian for salmon. Have a great night, stay safe, we'll catch you tomorrow.
And of course, we saw those police moving in on the protesters at the Shrine. Let's go back to Paul with a quick update. Paul, tell us what's happening.
So the Shrine has been cleared. Police are now coming down onto St Kilda Road, fortifying this street and others that come off St Kilda Road down towards Kingsway to stop them coming back. I suspect they're now trying to stop this group going through to the city. They seem to be down here. We'll give you full details at 6.
Good on you, Paul. Thank you. Good work. And that's all from the 7 Newsroom for now. Peter Mitchell's here at 6 from the 7 News team. Have a great afternoon.